broadening it and giving much more perspective.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that sort of fit with your understanding?
Yeah, exactly. I think exactly that was what I found out when I was researching to my studies, but also to my book. I didn't know that I was going to write this book at that time. I was just very keen on understanding what was actually going on in the body. And I was very focused on the body because I was studying the brown fat, which is a physical organ.
Yeah.
But I was also very puzzled by the whole thing, because then I went to the mind and I needed to read all what is happening in our brain when we go into the cold. Also, what happens when you go into the heat in the sauna. But what I couldn't connect was that feeling when people get into the cold, and this perspective that I could hear people talk about, and they talked about it in the same way, and I know they didn't talk together about telling me this. So everybody talked about it in the same terms of like feeling in this kind of like zen mood afterwards and being in mental balance, but also like this. People told me that it's very difficult to understand completely what it actually does. So, but it definitely gives some kind of perspective in life, and this perspective comes from getting out of your body, out of your mind a bit, being shocked a bit, but in a controlled way.
I think, thinking about mood issues, I'm not sure there's anything better than going in cold to immediately get you out of your head. You can't be in your head. You can't think about your anxieties and your worries and your email inbox and your shopping list and
exactly.
You can't do it in the cold because straight away it brings you into your body, doesn't it?
Exactly. You cannot, because you go into survival mode, right? So as soon as you go into the water, the sympathetic, the fight and flight system will start. And in that situation, if you think about us back when we were hunters, for example, we could not think about, what is actually going on back home, or we are sitting in the water and think about what to shop next tomorrow, or what I need to buy. You cannot think about anything else. You are in the moment, whether you want to or not. The cold will get you there.
Sorry to interrupt. If you are enjoying this content, there's loads more just like it on my channel, so please do take a moment to press subscribe, hit the notification bell, and now back to the conversation.
Immediately. You cannot decide this. You will definitely get there immediately. So that is why it's good when you asked me before, is this something we should tell anybody? Everybody? Yeah. Should everybody do this? And I think, yes. We are in a society right now where we are overwhelmed. We are overwhelmed in a way where we can see statistics of depression, anxiety, and stress curves going right up. You can go to the World Health Organization and see this statistics, and it's actually a bit scary, I think. And what are we doing? We are trying our best, I would say. We're trying our best to solve it in a way. Making more medication, but we have so much medication also. We have so much, and we are fighting to get more to help people, but I think we are missing the point. The point is that we are just working ourselves into this more and more and more, and forgetting where do we actually come from.
Yeah.
Well, can we do something completely different and take ourselves back to something we know this will actually work?
I love that. Where do we come from? That's kind of it in a nutshell, isn't it? This is who we are.
This is who we are.
And there's a beautiful section on page 243 of your English version of your book. Let me just pull it up.
Yeah.
Do you mind me reading it to you?
No, please.
These are your words, and I underline them, so I really love them. Nature, with its simple but harsh presence, does not deceive, as opposed to the internet and social media and their endless guides and advice. Nature is sincere. It's neither for nor against us. I think that's so powerful, Susanna. The way you wrote that, I think, is beautiful. And for me, it really speaks to this idea that try it, right? Sure, listen to what I've said or you've said, read your book, right? But that information is going to do nothing. Right? It's going to do nothing unless you actually do it.
Yeah.
And the cold will be your teacher.
Yeah, exactly.
It will probably showcase all these things that they're hearing about in our conversation, it will teach them if they do it. And I feel like a lot of the time these days, Susanna, I don't know what it's like in Denmark, but I feel these days, there's so much information everywhere, online, and loads of great people online who are sharing information, for sure. But I think sometimes we're consuming all this information. We think, yeah, that's great, and we drop a heart or we drop a like on Instagram, and we think that we've done something, but all we've done is actually move our thumb.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Yeah.
All we've done is move our thumb like half a millimetre forwards.
Yeah.
And we think, I'm doing something. We did nothing. Whereas, I'm just trying to bring it back to the cold.
Yeah.
It will get you out of your head.
Yeah.
It will shock your system. It will bring you into your body.
Exactly.
And it will remind us from where we've come.
Yeah, exactly. One of the questions I often get is, why? Why actually? Why do this? And do we need it? That is also a question I get a lot. Why are we talking so much about this? Or why are you talking so much about this? Why should we do this? And I think one of the reasons is definitely that there is a need. We also see that there is a lot of attention around this at the moment, and more people are doing it, which is great, I think. But there's also many people are asking these critical questions, and I love that. Keep them coming. I love it. That is what motivates me, because I love questions. But it's also at the same time, answering this must be because there is a need. Something, a trend or a new, you can call it health revolution, doesn't start because of no reason.
Yeah.
It's because we need it. And we have looked everywhere. Definitely in the medicine field, we have looked to solve depression and anxiety, and we have tried to keep people, you can say, not keep people healthy, but curing them from a disease. But what do we do to help people prevent a disease? We don't have a lot, right? And we don't have many places to go. So we need to do something different. We need to change something, because our stress, depression epidemic is just rolling on. It is just increasing. So we need to change something. And I think this is definitely one way to do it.
Yeah.
I think this could definitely be a reason. So this is your why. This is preventing lifestyle diseases. This is preventing depression. This is preventing pain. This is really helping people from this one kind of exercise that you do. Just going into the cold. You don't have to be good at it or good at anything, actually. This is just going in to the cold is something everybody can do. If you don't suffer from heart diseases or unregulated high blood pressure, I think that this is definitely something that we can tell people to do in a controlled way.
We've mentioned noradrenaline already, one of these chemicals in the body that gets released when we expose ourselves to cold. I think we should maybe just explain what noradrenaline is, what it helps with. But also, one of the things I love about the cold and the research is that, yes, noradrenaline goes up, dopamine also goes up, and it's a sustained release, isn't it? It's not just for 10 seconds.
No.
Some of the research I've seen, it's hours, right?
Yeah, I think it's so fascinating. When we look at noradrenaline, so noradrenaline is both a brain chemical, but it's also a hormone that is released from our adrenal glands. So you get it from two places in the body when you go into the cold. I have found out that I wanted to see where does it release first, but it's definitely from your brain that comes first, because it needs to activate the brown fat as well, right? So you don't freeze, but it also comes from your adrenal glands. That is increased within minutes up to 250% above baseline. That is a lot. And it's so rapid because it needs to save us, right? This is our fight and flight system. So we need the fast response. We cannot get that from the heat. We need to get that from the cold. So noradrenaline goes up 250% above baseline within a few minutes. If you can build that up, then you are good, I think. That is what you need. But at the same time, you also get that increase in dopamine. And dopamine is something that is really, really good for our drive, our motivation, and for, getting good habits as well. As when you get this release of dopamine going into the cold, I won't say that you will get addicted to the cold water, but you will get a really, really good feeling around going into the cold water because you get this happy, good feeling, good mood, good drive, good motivation, and afterwards. And this lasts for hours, up to 4 hours afterwards. But if you compare the dopamine effect, the increase from going into the cold, if you compare that with anything else, that could be, you also get that from cocaine, for example, or alcohol, or nicotine. You also get this high increase when you do that. But the difference is that you don't get the rapid crash afterwards. So if you do drugs, for example, you will have a rapid crash afterwards. That is why people go out and work more and more and more often also. But if you go into the cold, you will have a natural increase in dopamine, which will only make you feel better, but for hours afterwards. And this motivation and drive and good mood, you will have that for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
Like, let's say you're listening or watching this right now. Who doesn't want, more noradrenaline, so more attention and focus, more dopamine, more of that feeling of reward and motivation and drive? We all want that in our lives, but if you're struggling, if you feel low, if you struggle to get out of bed in the morning, you feel indifferent, maybe you've been diagnosed with depression, whatever it might be, you kind of want those things even more, and I guess just to really hammer home the point, what you've been saying continuously throughout this conversation is that it doesn't need to be long.
No.
Right? So if that person is struggling at the moment with the cold weather, the dark, low moods, I really, really, from my heart, would encourage them, maybe get in that shower, do 30 seconds cold, just get yourself the motivation to get in there and just see what happens. Do it day after day for let's say 3-4 days and just observe what happens. Do you know what I mean? It's that simple, but
it's very simple.
That effective as well.
It's so effective. But also I want to say, don't give up, because if you go the first time, you will probably not get all the benefits from the first time, because you cannot stay long enough to get the high release of everything good going on in your body. You will have to get through the first 3, 4, 5 rounds. I mean, so you need also to keep to it and believe in it. Just stick to it, because it's like starting up exercise in your training center, right? It will hurt. The first 5 kilometers you run will definitely hurt more than when you do it 5 times, right? And you don't start with a marathon, right? You never do that. So you don't start with 30 seconds in the shower. You start by 5 seconds, and then you build up to 10, 15. And maybe you can do 30 from the beginning, but that's because people are different. So just believe in it and just keep pushing it, because at some point you get so adapted to it. It won't take long, but it will definitely take a few times. So that's why I'm saying, no, try it first time and you're like, oh, that's not for me.
Yeah.
That only hurt. Yeah, it hurts the first time. Running 5 kilometers after a long break also hurts.
Yeah. There's a wider point there for me. And first of all, thank you for making that point. Really, really important. Now, of course, some people won't be able to control the temperature of the water. So let's say they're winter swimming, or let's say they're part of a local club and they go for cold dips. I know that's very popular in Scandinavia. I know it's growing in popularity in the UK. You can't control the temperature there. So you have to go into whatever temperature that is, right? But many people now, or I guess a few people, are either using cold plunge at a gym, or they're having, things in their garden, where they're putting in ice and they're actually trying to, in as cost-effective way as possible, replicate it at home. Now, first time you go in, of course you're not habituated yet, so it feels difficult. Over time, with regular practice, like with exercise, like with most things, we become more tolerant. And so let's say you go into 10-degree water, right? Cold water. It's under your 15, right? So 10 degrees. First time, you find it really hard, you can manage 10 seconds. Let's say after a month of doing it regularly, you can now do it for 4 or 5 minutes, and you're like, no problem, right? Should one stay there, or is there a benefit to dropping the temperature, so going from 10 to 9? Like, let's say you're lifting weights, and, you know, you're first of all struggling to lift that weight 2 times, you keep practicing, you can do it 5 times, you can do it 10 times, and then at some point, someone will say, well, instead of lifting that weight 10 times, why don't you go to a heavier weight and only lift it 5 times? It's going to have a different benefit in the body. Do we know yet, I know it's early days in all of this research, do we know yet whether, as you get habituated to a certain temperature, there are additional benefits from lowering that temperature?
So, we know that if you keep changing, or that is, you can say, if you look at physiology, just, if you keep changing the temperature, you will keep pushing your central nervous system, and you will keep pushing the activation of the chemicals in the brain. So what I always say is that you should keep changing the temperature. You can also start with 10 degrees, as you just mentioned, and just try to get habituated to that for a while, but then you need to also change the weight. So the temperature could be the weight on your weight.
So go down, you mean?
Yeah, you can go down, but you can also go up a bit. So as soon as you're changing it a bit, then at some degree, at some point you cannot get lower, right? But then you also stay less in the cold water. So there is a dose response, you can say. Yeah. So as the temperature gets colder, you stay, of course, not that long in the water. But if you keep changing it, just like nature, I always say, if you went to swim in nature, in the sea or a lake or whatever, you have the perfect temperature regulator right there.
Yeah.
It would change it for you. The seasons will change it for you if you live at least in a country where you have the seasons. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But if you don't have that, then you can look a little bit to what temperature do we actually have here. Do we go below 0? Maybe not all the time, right? So changing the temperature will challenge your cells, and it will challenge your mind, and in that way you will keep exercising your cold tolerance.
Now, you said you love questions. A question that has been popping up for me as we've been talking. And before I say I appreciate that, you know, you live in Denmark, and a lot of the research you're doing is in Denmark. We think about our evolutionary nature, where we've come from, and how that might impact our tolerance to cold. It might impact our levels of brown fat. And then I think about myself, you know, my ancestors are from India. So, you know, a lot of my ancestors, I imagine, would have pretty warm temperatures for most of the year.
Yeah.
Depending on where you are in India, you know, it would never get mega cold, right? You're not going to get that sort of coldness in the winter that we're going to get in Europe, for example, or certainly in Northern Europe. Do you know yet, have you been asked yet, you know, how different cultures, you know, how different ethnicities, you know, affects levels of brown fat that we have and our ability to tolerate cold?
So we know there is a difference in brown fat, in how much brown fat that we have across the world. So we would definitely see that some people also living in the colder countries, they have a bit more brown fat. We also know that women have more brown fat than men. And I think it makes sense. So if you are in a country where you would need the brown fat, so it's just the environment telling us that, well, we need this. But from nature's side, if you live in India or you're from India, then you will maybe not need as much brown fat as one who lives in a colder country. Women, for example, are, you can say, we are smaller, we have less muscle mass, and we have a large body surface, of course. And that means that we get colder easier than men. We get colder easier than men. And because of that, that is probably why we have more brown fat than men has, because we have the muscles that can heat you up. But for women, we don't have that much muscle mass, so we need more brown fat to heat us up. So it's always something about, I'll come back to it again, it's also about the request. If we request the body to heat itself up, because we live in a cold environment, then you will also have more brown fat. But people from India or people from, you can say, warmer countries, including myself, I'm half at least Sri Lankan and half Danish.
Okay,
So I know India and I know Sri Lanka, and it's very, very hot. I know from myself, and this is just from my side, I can only tell from my own point of view, that if I compare with my friends in Denmark who are Danish, they adapted to the cold faster than I did.
Yeah.
And I would say I'm a cold sissy, and I think it's absolute. I was a cold sissy. I was really. I didn't want to become a winter swimmer. I was definitely one of those saying, "Well, I studied this. Do I really have to become one myself?" And it took me a while to get convinced that I had to. But what I wanted to say is that I went to the cold, and I kept pushing it. So I didn't give up.
Yeah.
Luckily, I didn't. But it took me a longer time to get cold adapted than my friends.
Yeah. It's so interesting. First of all, I love the fact that, you know, you, Dr. Susanna Soberg, arguably one of the world's leading researchers in this area, is calling herself a cold water sissy or a cold sissy. I think that's brilliant. But I think it's a really important point that it speaks to that competition and ego piece from before, that everyone's going to be different. Your ethnicity is going to play a role. Your sex is going to play a role. I think many people, Susanna, will relate to what you said about women and men experiencing cold differently. I mean, it is such a common complaint that in a bedroom, the women want it warmer and the men want it cooler. I mean, this is a huge source of conflict, I would say, in certain households.
Yeah.
What temperature do you set the bedroom at? So I think that's really, really interesting. It also makes me think of my perception. I once went about, I guess 2 or 3 years ago. We were staying with our friends in Bristol, and my friend Jodie is a member of she goes cold plunging in the winter. She drives about, I think, 30 minutes out of Bristol to meet her friends. And we were there, I think, at New Year, and one morning she said, "Do you want to come?" And I thought, I'm game for anything, so I went.
Oh, wow.
This is years ago. I can't actually quite remember everything about it, but I remember there was more women there than men, number one. Number two, a lot of people had hats on and mittens on. It was freezing cold. And my perception of that and other experiences is that women, I feel, tend to tolerate the cold. It almost speaks to the opposite of what you're saying here about cold tolerance. I kind of find a lot of the time women can deal with the cold better than guys. And I think, is that just because, as I'm coming to realise as I get older, that women, I think, can tolerate pain and discomfort a lot more than men can? I don't know, help me understand that.
I think you just answered it. I think that might be it. I think women are built to tolerate stress and pain. Childbirth, exactly. So I think that's one thing. And I don't know if you call it the same thing here in the UK, but in Denmark we call it the man flu. The man flu, when men have the flu, it's just a little bit of pain, and they're like, "Oh my god!" and I mean, I think
half my audience is going to love that. Half of them might not share the same perspective, but that's okay.
Oh no, yeah, but I think that there is a bit of. I think there is a difference here in how we our perception of pain and perception of stress, even actually, because it's so linked. The pain, the stress, it's so linked. You feel more pain when you're stressed, right? And you actually also feel more cold when you're stressed. And it's also because of your veins are contracting, and you feel it more. But women are very good at pushing the stressed boundaries, I think, because they also built for it, I think. But this is only something that we can speculate. We don't have any real evidence for this. So
regarding the different cultures then, it's fair to say that as things stand, it's legitimate to think that people from different parts of the world will have different baselines level of brown fats.
Yeah.
But we have no reason to believe at the moment that there's a limit for people. Like, even if your ancestors from a hot country, even if you've grown up in a hot country, you can increase the amount of brown fat you have if you start exposing your cells to cold.
Exactly.
And it's really fascinating for me how this research, I wonder, have you any knowledge of research being done in hot countries? Do they do this in hot countries in a way that they do in Europe?
In kind of like cold plunging, and no, I don't know actually, because sometimes we don't know what exactly is going on for studies in other countries. We can go and look up ongoing studies if they are put into a certain database, and we can look that up, but often we only know it when it's published. So it could be that right now some more studies are actually going on also in hotter countries, but we know that there's a difference in cold receptors in the skin across the world. There's also a difference in the brown fat amount across different countries, hot, cold countries, and regions, you can also say. But I think no matter what, that you will benefit from going into the cold. It's just the amount of time that you're in and what temperature. You need to do that on an individualized plan. One of the things that actually I wanted to do when I kind of designed my study, because as I told you, I used to be a cold sissy, and I was like, the main thing for my research in my PhD was to find out if I can activate the brown fat in a way where we can actually use this, is make some kind of way that we can increase our amount of brown fat or the efficiency. And I wanted to do that because I wanted to do something applied research. Something that is useful. It's been driving me always, doing something that we can use for something, and it's not supposed to be a pill. That was one of the things I wanted to do, something that prevents also diseases, because we have a lot of like curing diseases, and we need it. It's not critical against that. We just don't have enough knowledge about our physiology and where to address it in preventing our diseases, our lifestyle diseases. So I wanted to do something like that. So what I did was to think about how can we activate the brown fat in a way that is accessible for most people. And I found research showing that going into a cold room and sleeping for a month will increase your amount of brown fat and increase your insulin sensitivity. But sleeping in a room that is hot again the next month then decreased it. So that kind of like confirmed that the cold is activating the brown fat and increasing, and it gets more efficient in that way. But that is not something everybody would like to do, sleeping at 19 degrees. But also there were studies showing that wearing a cooling vest for 10 days, 8 hours, will also increase your insulin sensitivity, and you will have more brown fat.
So hold on, you're going about your everyday life, you've just got a cooling vest on.
Yeah, and you can buy these. But I was like, well, I like the proof of concept here.
Yeah.
I love it, because that proved that if you expose yourself to cold, but this was quite a long time, and wearing a cooling vest, then you will increase your brown fat. And I was like, well, that's very cool. But I mean, who wants to wear a cooling vest all the time? I don't know. I mean, that was just not the study that I was going to use. So I was like, what can we else do? So that's why we came up with, what about the cold in winter swimming? Because we live in Denmark, so many people winter swim.
You mentioned a bit of research in your book where I think in Denmark, when people were asked about a list of things that they love to do, winter swimming came up third.
Yeah, at that time, when I started my research, and when I did that questionnaire, I did a questionnaire when I was writing my book. I had talked a lot in also the media about what am I doing, because I was doing something completely different. I was studying winter swimmers, and then people were like, we are studying winter swimmers, why?
Yeah.
That is just something that some people do, but it's kind of like a little bit, niche, right? But they were very interested, so I did this research around it, and so many people actually answered that what they love to do swim to swim and eat chocolate. So it's like on that level in Denmark, and I loved it because that was like, okay, I got at least support from people.
Yeah, I love that. They love it as much as they love eating chocolate.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
again, for
That's
that person who's skeptical, like, give this a go.
Yeah.
You know, when did you start researching? About 8 years ago?
Yeah.
Right, so I'm guessing back then it wasn't cool, it wasn't fashionable, it wasn't like taking over all the wellness Instagram accounts.
Not at all.
Right? What was it like for you when Professor Andrew Huberman talked about your research, called it the Soberg Principle, right, on the biggest show podcast on the planet, the Joe Rogan podcast, Joe Rogan Experience? Like, what happened? What was it? You know, how did you find out? What was it like for you? What emotions came up?
Well, he told me in person that he was going to do that. He was going to talk about my research on the Joe Rogan.
Okay, so he told you.
He told me right before, and he said that I know that you're ready. You can talk about this. You are ready. And I was like, am I ready? For what? and I was quite surprised. And then when he went on, I was like, man, he's doing it. He's talking about this and promoting it. He's promoting the cold.
Yeah.
And he's also promoting my research, and I'm just so grateful. I mean, so grateful that I'm doing something that actually makes sense and that is useful for people.
Yeah.
That is what I wanted to do back then when I started my research. I really wanted to do something that was useful, something that you can go out and give advice around, right? So when Huberman contacted me, when my research paper came out, I was like, yeah, okay, hi, yeah, and you would like to talk to me about this research? And I was like, yeah, okay, we can talk about that. But I had no idea that he was so much fan of the cold. I didn't know that, and I also didn't know that a lot of his followers were fan of the cold. And I think that kind of like, I was so honored. I was so honored. I mean, this has been so important to me.
I love that.
It was so important to me. I'm so happy and grateful that I'm doing this. I'm so grateful that so many people are supporting and that Huberman is supporting. And he has this great podcast. I mean, it's insane. It has just been skyrocketing the last year. I think it's...
Yeah, he's great. He's such a nice guy.
Yeah.
And it's just so wonderful that important research like yours, which has got so many implications for individual health and societal health, is being elevated by people with huge followings. You know, and to have it spoken about by Andrew on Joe Rogan, I imagine must have been quite a special moment.
It was really special.
Yeah.
It was.
Fantastic.
I'm so grateful to both of them. Really, it really made an impact in my life. Definitely changed everything.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about is culture.
Yeah.
And we just mentioned that bit of research you conducted in Denmark, where winter swimming is a thing that, you know, a lot of people enjoy and want to do. You also touched on sauna in your book. There's a whole chapter on sauna. And what's really interesting to me is that, certainly here in the UK, we associate sauna and cold with Scandinavia. If I remember, this is how many years ago now? I remember when I used to work in Timperley, which is, you know, a little village in the northwest of England. I used to go to the gym on the way to work in the morning. This is pre-kids, okay? I think I went at about 6:30 when it opened, and I'd do about half an hour in the gym, and then I'd finish off in the pool, and then there was this Danish guy who I got to know. I can't remember his name now, but he was there for like an hour, literally going, sauna, cold plunge, sauna, cold plunge. I remember chatting to him. This is years ago, right?
Yeah.
So I knew nothing about the research. I said, hey, what's going on? He goes, no, it's great. It's really good for my circulation. So again, an anecdotal kind of,
Yes.
you know, just a comment.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, sounds good. I'm going to try it. So I tried it for, now and again or a few weeks, whatever. I don't actually remember. But this whole cultural phenomenon, like, are you finding that certain cultures are more willing to accept the information and act on it than others? I don't know, you know, do you feel in Denmark, is this message landing in a particular way compared to, let's say, the UK? Have you got any experience with that?
Yeah, so it seems like in Denmark, because we have this culture around, it's also cold in the UK, so we have about the same, you can say, temperature-wise, air and water. But in Denmark, there is definitely a culture around winter swimming, and we don't really have a sauna culture in Denmark. We don't really have that, but we have like borrowed stuff from Finland, and we have borrowed a bit from Germany, where they do the sauna goose, which is like pouring water over the stones and then swinging the towels around and then putting essential oils on and stuff like that, and also maybe sometimes listen to music inside the sauna. So there's different cultures coming in, and in Denmark we have been practicing this for a while now, maybe 10 years or something like that.
But it's mostly cold in Denmark, isn't it?
It's mostly cold, yes, exactly. But the sauna culture is very new in Denmark as well. But it's starting to pop up more and more. And apparently, we are a culture where we like going back and forth to doing the contrast therapy for blood circulation. We adapted that quite easily, I would say. We take that in as a culture because we are, I don't know, Scandinavia, close to Finland and Germany, where they already are doing this. So we adapted that. So I think when I did my study, I wanted to find out an easy protocol with how low dose can we get health benefits from the cold.
Yeah.
That was one thing, and also I wanted to study a method which was already very much used in Denmark, and that is going into the sauna and going into the cold. So my study results are based on the contrast of activating your cold response, but also activating your heat response.
Yeah. You know, having spent quite a bit of time in Scandinavia over the past few years when my books have been released there, you know, Sweden, Norway, Denmark even, what strikes me is that, you know, the culture tends to be a lot more equal than we often see, let's say here in the UK, or certainly in America, I would say. And there's a lot of research on Denmark and happiness.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I read about the culture there and how, you know, in certain organizations, culturally the CEO will only earn a certain percentage above what the lowest paid worker is going to get. So it's not going to be like huge differences where the lowest paid in the company is on, you know, this amount and the CEO is on a different amount. I've heard that a lot of the social activities, whether it's golf or whatever, you can have like a CEO of a company playing alongside someone who cleans toilets in an office building.
Yeah.
It's always fascinated me, and of course that must be a contributory factor to happiness and general well-being. But then if I look at the cold through that lens, and I think about culture, and what's really interesting for me is that, you know, going in the cold in clubs, in community with other people, like, you're stripped away your any status, any money, any suit, any nice clothes, everything's stripped away. It's just you and a swimsuit and your body. And I don't know if you could share with me, but it seems to me that that kind of thing, the kind of acceptance of that sort of thing, feels to be more of a Scandinavian thing. It feels like in the UK, people have got huge hang-ups about their bodies, you know, and I'm not criticising that, right? I understand that. But ultimately, we've all got bodies.
Maybe that is exactly what is actually going on. We have packed ourselves so much up. We never see each other really in a bathing suit. We don't expose our bodies to temperatures anymore. If we go, that is only in the summer, right? So I think that you mentioned the culture difference also. So in Denmark, I think we have been winter swimming for many years. I know that it's only a new trend also in Denmark that more people are winter swimming, and it's not only for the wild and crazy ones anymore. It's just for everyone, and people are finding out. But the culture around going into the cold is definitely something that also builds in Denmark around our way of being social together. So I think you are right on that. We have a way of also trying to keep our clubs, and we have a social life that is like very engaging. We try to have that. I think we are struggling to keep it up because loneliness is also increasing, also in Denmark, and happiness is also decreasing, just like the rest of the world. So stress, anxiety, and depression are going up also there. So we see it in an effect all over. So we definitely need this. We need places where you can go and be social, where you don't have to think about status and you don't have to think about how you look. Or we're just human beings. And when you go into the sauna, if you have someone out there who's tried that, then you know that you are not looking at the other's bodies or anything. You don't. You are just there. You're being very mindful, sitting in there, and just actually releasing everything of your stress. Just let that out of the sauna. Eventually you will learn to do that and find it a peaceful room. But you will also find it very social if you go with your friends. That is a place where you probably don't have to discuss any heavy stuff, but you can if you like to. But you can also just be there and be together, and that connects people.
It's just super fascinating for me as I think of how this movement is growing and where it's coming from, how all these things play out. Susanne, honestly, I could talk to you for hours. Honestly, I think it's so fascinating, this whole area. To try and sort of bring this conversation towards a close, in terms of practical recommendations, we mentioned a few already. Wearing a hat. People going winter swimming or going, obviously in a shower you're probably not going to wear a hat, but winter swimming or going into a cold plunge yourself, let's say it's outside, there's benefits to wearing a hat, isn't there? And then if you could also speak to, do you need to get your head underwater? I think that's really, really important.
So I think that if you can wear a hat, especially if you think that you get too cold too easily, and if there's a strong wind, that could actually determine how long time that you're going to sit in your cold plunge, and if you can pass the cold shock response. So wear a hat, because they also protect your ears from the wind, and especially if you I have like, my ears always get super easily cold, and then I get a bit dizzy. So cold ears and ear infection, if you are like prone to that, then wear a hat, because that will protect you. Also, a lot of heat is coming out of your head, right? So I think that is around 80% of our body temperature is actually coming out of our head. So if you put a hat on, then it's more, you can say, controlled to the rest of your body. So wear a hat is definitely a good thing if you have those kind of issues also. I always take my hands above the water because my fingers hurt, and I don't think that should hold people back. So if you think that will help you, then take your hands up or wear gloves. If it's icy, then do that, because then you can stay in the water for a little bit longer.
So you can get the benefits even without your hands in, even without your head in. I think that's great for people to hear.
Actually, I think that this is also really important, that you can get the benefits from just putting a hand in the water, or hands or feet or in the water. You can get some cold adaptation actually from that.
Wow.
There's actually studies showing from it's fishermen who have their hands a lot in cold water. Shows that nice research have been done on these fishermen, and it shows that they are cold adapted all over their body, but only their hands will actually in the cold water. And I think this actually tells us that the body is like one system. It's not the hand is one thing. It's the whole system. It's all connected. So if you get cold adapted from submerging up to your neck and you don't put your head under, you will get adapted anyways.
I love it. So just doing the washing up in cold water, we're sort of getting all these benefits. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay. And just to finish off then, what Andrew has named the Soberg principle was based on a paper I think he published in 2021, which has got like a conclusion for people, isn't it? In terms of, for people who are like, okay, Susanna, you convinced me, right? I don't do it, I'm in. You have some recommendations for the cold in terms of duration and also heat, like sauna. So I wonder if you could just share those for people, please.
Yeah. So based on my research, where, as I started the conversation telling you that I wanted to find the minimum threshold for where can we get benefits and not have to stay extremely long. So I wanted to do some kind of research where we know from this kind of you could say micro-stressing the body, we will still get benefits. And what the study showed was actually that, and this is shown in winter swimmers who are adapted to winter swimming. They have been winter swimming for 2 to 3 seasons before I studied them for 1 season. But what we saw, when you are cold adapted, and you will get that really quickly if you are new, but when you're cold adapted, you can increase, or you can do your cold exposure 11 minutes per week is actually enough. And this is in total, I just want to underline that. 11 minutes in the cold water in total per week, but divided on 2 to 3 days. And on each day, you can do 3 dips. So you can divide that up in minutes, at probably around everything from 2 to 4, 5 minutes or so per dip. So you don't have to go across that. You don't have to be in the water for many minutes to get these benefits, this study shows. So 11 minutes per week divided on 2 to 3 days and up to 3 dips.
Oh, so once you're adapted, 11 minutes is all you need a week?
Yes, exactly. So you can build, as when you are new, you just have to, when you're new, you can look at the 11 minutes as a protocol for a method for getting there. And when you get there, you know, well, this is about 11 minutes. It could be 12 for some, and it